For my lesson plan project, I had students focus on creating pedigrees on recessive and dominant traits in their own lives, and then tracing those dominant and recessive traits back through their pedigree and through their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. And doing this project addressed the following standards. Students will recognize how biological traits are passed on to successive generations, and they will explain the role of genes and chromosomes in that process of inheriting recessive and dominant traits. This also allowed them to establish context to explore life experiences related to their subject area content. So in doing this project, students were required to create a screencast presentation in the form of a video. So most of my students elected to use iMovie. However, some of them chose to use Animoto. For example, this student used Animoto. She was able to upload pictures from her family as well as video clips of her explaining her pedigree. Other students used Animoto as well. Students spent about a week doing this project in my 7th grade science class, and I mainly focused on my gifted class doing this, though I also allowed several other students to work on it as well. And this counted as a particular project grade and went in twice to show their understanding and for them to have explained how these particular projects or particular traits were passed through their family. So some of my students had questions for me outside of class when I couldn't answer them. And so what we did and elected to do was to use today's Meet. And so students were able to enter this chat room. I kept it open for a week, and they were allowed to ask any questions they may have of me or of other students. Some of my students actually answered questions for other students before I even got to them, which was very helpful. Some of my students don't speak English very well. They're still learning, and so as they were struggling with the content, we were able to use BrainPop in Spanish, which was very helpful for them, especially the videos on recessive and dominant traits and even on DNA and what DNA basically is. When my students had created their pedigrees, they were asked to look at this particular rubric. So whether or not they had a key present for their pedigree, if they could show that the recessive trait and dominant traits were being passed down, if there were any errors or not, even their presentation, if they can clearly understand, if they had smooth transitions and pictures. And so they were encouraged to look at this and do a self-check. Students were given a partner, and through their school email addresses, they were to email their video to their partner and copy me on the email, and then they were to comment and share specifics of how to improve their partner's video based on this rubric, and they were then sharing it with me. So there was that level and aspect of collaboration as they worked with each other to improve their product. My biggest struggle with attempting to create this project was wondering if the internet was going to go out, and so with that, the best way to solve that problem was to use the school iPads. So I had my students do as much recording on the iPads as possible because we have school intranet that they could use, and so they were able to use that and upload it. Some students elected to use their own devices, their own phones, to record themselves, and so the issue became, where can they have quiet space? And so some students elected to work outside in order to have a little bit more quiet to do that. Technical difficulties besides the internet, a lot of my students struggled with Animoto. This student in particular was able to get it to work for her, but she did have trouble with the ending. She had some extra clips in there with this little butterfly and dog that she didn't mean to keep there. So Animoto was more of a struggle. iMovie seemed to be more comfortable for the students. I think if I were to do this again, and attempt to do it again, I would spend more time on the front end teaching my students how to use Animoto and iMovie, maybe giving them more examples. This was the first time I had done this project, and so I didn't have a whole lot to show them, so they were kind of the guinea pigs for figuring it out. And so next time I would plan to have good examples to show them on the front end of what it should look like, of how they should transition, how they should record themselves speaking, and what they should share. But for the most part, I think students really did enjoy being able to share more information about their own lives, and because it became a personal project on their own recessive traits, they were very much engaged.